Chapter 7. The Way We Once Were. Unconscious in his craft, Qualdor slept on as the ocean's waves slowly pushed his sub on top of the sand. The vessel rolled onto the empty beach and stood still. In the silence, Qualdor woke up from his blackout. He felt the need to release himself from the interior of the miniature machine. He unlocked the vessel's seals and slowly slid the top open. He sat around for some time, letting the breeze from the ocean clear his thoughts. Slowly, he regained a measure of clarity and released his safety device and walked out of his bubbled environment. Once his feet made contact with the sandy beach, he knelt down with his hands on his knees for a little while, still needing to regain his sense of balance. When he was finally able to stand up straight, for the first time, he felt very strange, as if trying to get used to his own body again. He indulged himself in a couple of deep breaths to fill his lungs to capacity and then powerfully released the air through his mouth. He repeated the sequence several times and then attempted something else. He flung his arms about in different directions, feeling their freedom of movement. Raising his head and face upwards, he viewed the sky and the sun, so endless, so eternal, so much like the seas. He heard sounds of laughter from the shadows ahead. Holding his hands above his face to block the sun's rays from piercing through his eyelids, he saw 3 dark shadows advancing towards him. The voices from the shadows sounded like women's voices as they advanced closer. They're coming in my direction. Who could they be? He thought to himself. Curiosity overtook his ability to reason as he stood there with his hands shading his eyes, attentively listening and waiting for the answer to his questions. The shadows drew closer and closer until they were close enough for him to make out their figures. "Women!" he exclaimed. 3 women! 3 women!" He kept repeating to himself. From the distance, he was not able to fully make out how the women were clad. He was more concerned with inspecting their hips and arms for weaponry of some kind. After his recent experiences with shootings and bombings, he was now knowledgeable enough to look for strapped weaponry on any new inhabitant he encountered. When the women approached close enough to block the sun from his eyes, he was able to clearly make out the details of their appearance. For a few brief seconds, he analyzed each woman carefully. One was dark with black hair and round dark eyes, while the other was fair-skinned with blonde hair and round green eyes. The last woman was also fair-skinned with black hair and dark slanted eyes. The women wore the latest in high-fashion bikinis. From his first impression, they looked like normal women, similar to the women he saw every day of his life. But how are they here? How are they connected to the divers with spears? Qualdor asked himself silently. The women held their hands on their hips and tilted their heads from side to side as they checked him out. Inquisitively, Qualdor asked, "You're a woman, right?" "Yeah, boy." "What do we look like to you?" the dark woman responded, causing all 3 to roar in laughter. They raised their arms up and in a playful fashion turned around full circle for his confirmation. "As you can see, boy, we are women, and full-grown women at that. No operations here, boy," sang the blonde woman while flaunting her chest. "Operation? You mentioned operation. What do you mean by that?" questioned Qualdor, rather confused. The word evoked uneasiness in him. This can't be a place where they would be operated on to turn themselves into something different, he questioned to himself. Unbeknownst to Qualdor, what the women were referring to were beauty operations such as breast enhancement and liposuction. "You must be a foreigner, boy. Look at those clothes you're wearing on the beach. Isn't that a little heavy for beach wear? What kind of clothes are they? And that boat you're riding in, what kind of boat is that? asked the woman with the slanted eyes. Yes, I am a foreigner, replied Qualdor, answering the best he could to their southern drawl. His inquisitive expressions captivated the women. They looked at each other from the corner of their eyes and smiled. If he wanted to know more about his surroundings, he was in the right place at the right time, because they were going to help him find out everything he wanted to know. Well, why don't you leave your space bubble here and come with us to our house? We promise to treat you with southern charm and hospitality, said the blonde woman, as the others looked on with wide, sultry smiles. Curiosity overtook his caution. The promise of having all his questions answered drew him to the women. They turned and walked towards their homes as Qualdor followed closely behind them. They walked on past the sand, onto the grass, and towards the trees. Captain, I can see what looks like a giant UFO, called out the commander to his captain while peering through the periscope of an amphibious cruiser. Must be where the other spies are hiding. Funny, we never picked them up on our radar. It must be a special Russian spy ship, responded the captain. Mark course straight ahead, he ordered, and send missiles to aim and fire. Course marked straight ahead and missiles armed, sir, acknowledged the commander. This is certainly not what the aging captain had intended, but the experience gave him the insight as to what to do in every situation because he had been through it all. In the captain's mind, the entire Earth was made up in terms of conflicts rather than geographical locations. His completely whitened head had seen both times of war and of peace. He had even commanded a fleet of his own battleships. His hair was salt and pepper then. He eventually had to retire from commanding his own battleship due to the weariness that accompanies having experienced too much conflict. Although his body felt older, the firmness of his routinely executed exercise regime could easily be seen in his appearance. It is no wonder the Undersecretary found it hard to believe that such a strong, youthful-looking, mature man could be in search of full retirement while his mind and body remained so sharp. But despite what the Undersecretary thought, the captain had cloned himself by training his commander to think and react exactly like him. Once a commander could take over the ship, he was applying for full retirement. Valtor, a few decimals from us and just directly above us, the waters come to an end, Troy warned. Can we go above it, Troy? Asked Valtor. Yes, we can, sir. The atmosphere above the waters doesn't register as a solid mass, confirmed Troy. Sir, I hate to challenge the notion of our ancestors' discovery of Atlantic, but it seems as though these people were here before us, said Phasar, as he displayed the captain's ship on the screen. Intensify shields, ordered Faltor. Phasar intensified the shields, and Faltor immediately sent orders through the Aqua Phi for everyone to return to their compartments and brace themselves. Start up engines, ordered Faltor. Get us moving on a course towards that vessel. Captain, they started to move, the commander advised, but before the captain could give his order, the lieutenant commander pressed the button, releasing the missiles. The captain turned to him and burned a hole through the middle of his forehead with his glare. How are we going to explain this one to Moscow? The captain questioned under his breath. We've got company approaching us at high speed, sir, called out Phasar. Well, we wanted to see what was above the waters, said Faltor just as Phasar maneuvered the Aqua Phi in an upward direction. The Aqua Phi rose above the waters, and as it did so, the crew caught sight of the most remarkable views they had ever seen. Faltor commanded Phasar to slow the ship's rise above the waters in order to absorb every detail of the magnificent scenery. Underneath the ocean, directly below the Aqua Phi, the torpedoes exploded, propelling the vessel even higher. Captain, you know that submarine that was underwater? You won't believe this, sir, but now it's up in the air, observed the commander as he peered through the ship's periscope. What? Let me see that, exclaimed the captain as he pushed the commander out of the way.